Part two, right?
Welcome to the August 2nd Board of Education work session. We have an agenda in front of us. I believe you should have the corrected agenda in front of you for the consent agenda items where everything is numbered appropriately. If you picked up an earlier one, it might not be so. But we do have quorum, and so we are ready to get started. And with that, who wants to do the roll call? Is that going to be you?
I can do it. I can do it.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Davis? Here. Mr. Worthy? Here. Dr. Knox? Here. Ms. Thornton?
Here.
Ms. Davis?
Here.
Mr. Payne?
It's here.
Ms. Williams? Ms. Ellis? Mr. Bobby?
Okay, thank you very much. With 5 members here, we do have quorum, so we can proceed. And I know that at least, I know Sarah's on her way, so if you hate to miss your superintendent's report, but we'll have to catch her up. So I'll turn it over to you for the superintendent's report.
Timing's everything.
Yeah.
So thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to go over a few things, and hopefully it'll tie into some other conversations later that we'll have. But I wanted to share, and I don't know if I can project or not.
What do you want to do?
The presentation. Just wanted to share with the board and our goal. You'll notice with our new logo that there's sun rays coming from our school system. And that's because while we have challenges and things that we can work on, we have to always remain optimistic and look towards the future. And so when you look at our new brand in terms of our logo and what we are focusing on, we want to make sure that we're sending a message that we're inclusive, that we're fearless, and we're resilient, that we're ready to do the difficult work that's ahead of us. And so the last this past Monday and Tuesday, we had something called PACE Institute. We didn't call it employee kickoff. We called it PACE Institute. PACE stands for prepare, align, engage, and collaborate. I didn't spell that right.
You sure did.
Prepare, align, collaborate, and engage. And so that's what PACE Institute stands for. It's an acronym to say that we want to have our employees prepare, align, collaborate, and engage. And so what we did is you approved a new ELA curriculum this past spring. What we did is we actually had facilitators work with all of our teachers who were implementing that curriculum for the past 2 days, teach them how to use the curriculum with the materials. I had a chance to go to an elementary school today, and I said, so how was the training? And they all said, it was great, which is, that's good. For all of us who know teachers, that's these days are tough. And so we were really happy that the teachers enjoyed it. That was on the K-8 level. Our high school teachers worked with the same person that worked with our high school teachers and middle school teachers who created standard-based assessments for our end of course classes. If you remember, in the spring again, you approved our district to work with a group that would help us build standards-based assessments. And we did that for our end of course classes. Well, we wanted to capture our non-end of course classes. And so for Monday and Tuesday during professional development, that's what our middle school and high school teachers were doing. So it was high level professional learning, but at the same time, it was also fun. We tried to have fun those 2 days as well. We had 2 amazing, I believe, keynote speakers, Christine Moraz, who's a teacher in New York City schools she's been using the materials that our teachers are using now. If you remember in some of the publications I put out in the spring, I talked about this concept called collective efficacy. Collective teacher efficacy is something that, according to the research, that's the #1 effect that drives student achievement. And the #1 component that drives collective teacher efficacy is for teachers to see other teachers using materials and being in that same situation and striving and being successful. So in other words, it's one thing to say, let's try this new curriculum. It's another thing to have a teacher who is working in New York City and finding success with the same materials. And Christine did an amazing job on day one. On day two, we had a gentleman by the name of Richard Milner. Richard Milner's from Griffin, Georgia, and he was amazing. He captured everyone's attention during his keynote. But again, I said we went to have fun. So during the 2 days, during our general sessions, we also heard from building principals who are actually doing this work and have implemented change in their schools already. And I think all of our principals did a great job. But the star of the show was Dr. Marsha Thomas, who talked about the work that she did and her team implemented at Coyle Middle School. So our PACE Institute, I thought, went very well. A lot of people, all these people right here deserve a lot of credit. Our curricular coordinators, in particular, Dr. Amy Peacock, deserves tons of credit. We started planning this, I want to say April. And the number, I don't know how many times Dee Vodka, Zenona Thomas, and Amy Peacock walked the Classic Center, but we had enough room for everyone. I had a lot of teachers come up to me and say, I've never had this type of PL before. Our vision was to create a conference-like experience for our teachers, because a lot of our teachers won't go to a conference. They won't be able to go, and if they do, they may only go once. We created that experience. I will be able to show you next week video. You'll be able to see the video, but Dr. Nolan and Mr. Harris, our executive directors of elementary and secondary education, they arranged for the drum line and cheerleaders from both high schools to greet our teachers as they came off the bus. A lot of hard work went into it. Fabian Jones deserves a lot of credit for getting all of our staff to the Classic Center. It was a cast of thousands to make it work, but it was really gratifying to have staff members who've been here a long time say, I've never had PL at this level. And again, at the same time, we had fun. Dr. Elijah Swift did a roll call of schools, and it was fun. If you were there for that second day, you saw schools try to get loud. There were 3 winners. It was BHL, Barnett Shoals, and Whitehead. How could I forget Whitehead Road? They had a flag. They had their own school flag that they ran down the aisle. But and I think that was just another portion of. There's a lot of hard work. But I think we emphasize there's work ahead of us, but we can create community and have fun at the same time. It was really special to see all the staff with their shirts on, their school shirts on, and I think it was a good time. So that's our new logo, and that's our new what we stand behind. I was able to use the what we believe in terms of becoming better every day when I had a chance to speak to our school nutrition staff today, and I was able to recognize Miss Mary, who is an employee over at Whitehead Road. She's 92 years old. But she comes to work every day with the mindset that she's going to be better every day. And her colleagues, her peers gave her a round of applause for being better every day. As you know, you passed we now have a strategic plan, and our strategic plan is in place. We will start the rollout of our strategic plan next week. During the summer, it's hard for me to get to Rotary, but this is a good reason for me to get back to my Rotary Club meeting. I will be addressing the Rotary next week, Wednesday, talking about the state of our schools and the role of our rollout of our strategic plan. And so that's our mission statement. I think it's really important to know some of the words that you chose: ambitious community of learners, and we're committed to equity and excellence on every campus, in every classroom, for every child. Our theory of action is one that our strategic plan committee created, and it talks about the work that we are committed to ensuring that this mission statement comes into play. Strategic planning can only happen if you have not only a mission that's very clear, but also a theory of action. And it's gratifying and also humbling to know that this is one full year now for me with this August meeting. My first meeting with you was the first August meeting. And we talked about we were going to create a new strategic plan. And to have this in place now is really impressive. As you know, the Board of Education in the district has been working with 2 consultants on equity work. It's Elise Vertura and Colleen Capper. You've met with them twice. And they're also working with the Unified Government, as the Unified Government has an equity and diversity task force. And so that overlap has really been good. Elise Vertura and Colleen Capper said that one unique component of the strategic plan that you passed, that you created, that they don't see in most other strategic plans is the component around equity. That most districts talk about equity, but they don't have it actually in their strategic plan. So I just wanted to point out to you and the community again how proud we all collectively should be around that work. You should have seen this document before, but if you haven't, here it is for you again. These are our indicators of college and career success. We've identified areas in where each child should be on grade level or performing at a certain level throughout their K-12 experience. And that's the reason why you approved last year NWEA MAP. That's a tool that we're going to use to assess if students are moving appropriately across these steps. That's why you approve the use and the passage of the new ELA curriculum to make sure that students are working and working at grade level. And I'm going to get into the milestone data in a few minutes. We have work to do. You've heard me talk all year about being systems thinking and creating a system. Well, last year we created a system. The system consists of 4 areas. You've been addressing and will continue to address instructional materials and assessment. When you talk about equity work, the research says that you have to have high quality materials to allow teachers to demand high cognitive tasks in the classroom. If you don't have high quality materials, it's difficult to require high cognitive demand in terms of tasks. And if you can't make high cognitive demands in terms of assignments, then it's really hard to elevate classroom achievement. We've also talked about assessment throughout the school year. Again, I've mentioned NWEA MAP to you. That's a factor in terms of why we are moving forward. We have to know where kids are. Last year, we started the process of building school growth plans. And now we're in the process of allowing each school to develop a college and career readiness plan. That's what the CCR stands for, College and Career Readiness Plan. So every school has to have a college and career readiness plan that's going to focus on instruction, systems, culture, and leadership, Leadership, instruction, culture, and systems. Those are the 4 components of college and career readiness. I want to come over to the teacher learning subsystem next. It's really important for us to support teachers. We're asking teachers to do more in the classroom, but in order to ask teachers to do more in the classroom, we have to have high-level professional learning. And hopefully people are starting to see that we're providing that high level of professional learning for teachers. We have an instructional coach in every school. It's important that instructional coaches are there to support teachers, not to be individuals who are collecting data or people who are picking up administrative tasks, but individuals who are there to answer questions and to help teachers, to be a support. To give teachers collaboration time. I just met with our Title I director today. There are opportunities for us to continue to provide collaboration time and to compensate teachers to collaborate and to meet with one another around planning and preparing lessons. And then finally, teacher networks. Teacher networks are important because you have to create a space where teachers feel comfortable connecting and reaching out to people who may be able to help them. So in the case of our new ELA curriculum, the district, through our title funds, have been able to hire 2 new ELA implementation specialists. These are people who are available to teachers anytime to help them work through the new curriculum. Typically, curriculums fall when districts say, here's the new curriculum, good luck. We wanted to create support. And we hit home runs with these two hires. They're amazing teachers that people will recognize and will say, yes, this is someone that I have confidence in. There are also people who have used this curriculum in the past. And then finally, you have to have supplemental supports for currently struggling students. You have to have a program and a system that's going to help kids. Typically, school systems will say, the teacher who can reach the struggling kids the best, you go work with those kids. But you have to have a system, you have to have a strategy that's going to work with currently struggling kids as well. And we're starting to put that together as well. And you'll hear something from the administration next month in regards to finalizing that system. So you'll see with this slide, now I don't know if you've seen this slide before. I use it a lot, but I want to share this slide with you. The role of the district is to create curriculum and an assessment system. It's to set up that instructional system that I just shared with you. That's our job. And all last year, that's what we constructed. We constructed a curriculum and an assessment system that will allow us to identify the knowledge and skills all students can demonstrate at the end of a grade or course. That's our job. That's our role. That's the system. You remember as we talked about things last year, and I think I made a large presentation to you maybe around September or October. I said at the time we were absent the system and we needed to reconstruct it. It's been done. It's fun. It was fun work, but it's good work and it's been constructed. But here's where now the work transfers over to the school level. So you'll notice here on the side it says district influence. Everything else down this path belongs to the school. So the creation of school growth targets belongs to the site leadership team. So every school has a leadership team that's constructing their school growth plan. And they're constructing their college and career readiness plan. And that's the work that the faculty rallies around. That's not work that the district influences, that's site influence. At the next level is review of assessment data. How are the kids doing? And this again is site leadership influence. That's the team at the school level identifying if kids are learning or not and making adjustments if they're not learning. At step 4 is teacher team influence. How will educators apply data literacy to refine their planning? So in other words, if your kids aren't learning, what are you going to do to adjust? John Hattie, I mentioned John Hattie before. He did this study on the effects of student achievement. Again, he said the number one factor in student achievement is collective teacher efficacy. He also talks about the fact that in order for learning to happen, teachers have to transition from being individuals who evaluate student learning to evaluating the impact of their teaching and realizing how am I impacting the learning of kids. And that's, again, Christine Mraz, our keynote speaker on day one, also talked about the fact that it's not about evaluating the progress of kids. It's really about looking at yourself as the educator. That's research driven. And then finally, teacher influence in terms of refining instructional practices. I like to use this slide to say, yes, we've constructed the system, but the system's now constructed. That's the pass off. That this is now the transition. Now the work belongs to the schools. It belongs to building principals. It belongs to teacher leaders. And that's where I believe we start making the change, because now the ownership of this work belongs to principals and teacher leaders. And this is how we do our work in Clarke County. We're driven by a strategic plan. We're always looking to improve. We are always analyzing data, using measurable goals, and developing action plans. That's how and it's a plan, do, study, adjust model, where we are planning, we're going to do, we study, and we adjust. Again, these are concepts and structures that weren't in place a year ago. Now they're in place. Now we can get better every day. Talked about educational equity before. This means ultimately that outcomes and experiences for every student every day gets better. And so it's one thing to talk about equity. It's another thing to ensure that teachers are applying high-level instructional strategies to ensure that kids are growing. And so what this means is that you have to have a disruptive mindset from an instructional standpoint. I'm going to go back to this slide, because now at the school level, we need principals and teacher leaders who are going to have a disruptive mindset. And what that means is we're not reforming what we do. We're going to transform our classrooms. We're going to transform how we discipline students to ensure that we're being equitable with all kids. Because you've heard me talk about equity, it's also about social justice. And the only way that you can have social justice is if you disrupt the status quo of this organization in order to make historically marginalized student populations central to our institutional vision, advocacy, and practice. In other words, if we know that there are groups of kids who are historically behind, we have an obligation to make sure that we're having conversations on how we're going to disrupt our systems to ensure that those kids are growing. So our milestone data shows that we have work to do. And I have the milestone, I think everyone has the milestone data in front of them. There's a concept called the greatest area of need, or the GAN. And you'll see that our greatest area of need is our African American students. The fact that we have, and I'm rounding up, 15% of our 3rd through 5th graders reading at proficiency is a concern. And even if you drill down into the data, and I think, again, it's in front of you, the fact that 55% of those students are at level 1, there's work for us to do. And when you combine that with the disproportionality of discipline across our district, we don't have time to reform, we have to transform. I'll go back to the keynote speaker on Monday. She talked about the fact that there's a direct correlation between instruction and discipline. That if you have high level instruction happening in every classroom, high cognitive demands of tasks happening in every classroom, kids don't have time to misbehave. If you have cultures that are embracing and welcoming every student, again, you don't get into a situation where you're being disciplined. I'm reminded by the quote again. You've heard me use this quote by educational philosopher John Dewey, where he said, "What the best and wisest parent wants for his own child, that must be what the community wants for all of its children." So whoever we believe is the best and wisest parent in Clarke County, whatever that family wants for their child, we have to want for every child in this district. Victoria Bernhardt once said, and you've heard me use this before, your organization is perfectly designed for the results you are getting. The work that we were engaged in last year was to start the redesign of our organization so we can get different results. And so I want to show you, hopefully this, I'm going to show you a video here for a second.
2,288 days. That's how long the Clarke County School District has to teach a child. Within those days, we must prepare each student for the rest of their lives, and we cannot fail. We start with discipline and self-respect. We teach students to be critical thinkers so that they can continue their self-guided education beyond our schools. We must teach them to be inclusive and accepting by first making them feel included and accepted. Our education includes rigorous academics, discipline-developing athletics, and inspiring extracurricular activities that challenge our children. We must help each student grow socially and emotionally. We must recognize that there are moments when we are reinforcing common sense and other times when we will be the only guidance a child ever receives. Each child will arrive with his or her own unique set of strengths and challenges. It is our job to meet them where they are, recognize all they can be, and do everything we can to close the gap. The commitment to lifelong learning we expect from our children starts with the CCSD promise, a promise to meet the unique needs of every student in every classroom to achieve the moral imperative of educational equity. Our jobs are among the very most important because we have the ability to positively alter the course of our most vulnerable children's lives. The responsibility is enormous, but we must be brave and relentless in our work, endless in our optimism, and tireless in our belief that effective teachers can significantly increase achievement for all students. We will support all among us who turn to us for guidance and growth. But we must recognize that there are children who depend on CCSD as their primary support system and provider of their most essential needs. While this role is challenging, it is vitally important to the community we live and work in. We have 2,288 days to make a difference that will last a lifetime. But at CCSD, we do not count the days, we make the days count.
So 2,288 days. That's what we have for a child who enters kindergarten and they graduate from high school. When you take the instructional days, we have 2,288 days. We have a lot of work to do. I feel the level of urgency. Our staff does, and they're invested. They're dedicated. They're committed to the work. We had a great kickoff, and I know we're going to get better every day. And so I want to conclude my report, and we'll take any questions. We're ready to move forward with the next phase of this work. Last year was about constructing the system and creating structures where we can do this and move in the right direction. Now it's about supporting people, making people feel as if they can grow in this space, in this work, and continue to get better every day.
Wow. Great.
Yeah, one question I've got, Dr. Means, is I know we talked about, putting a lot of supplemental stuff for struggling students, with the interest of that, and also in terms of disrupting the status quo within our schools to achieve the progress we want. How do we, and maybe there are already things in place, but how do we change a culture that at least I've seen every school I've been in, where the teachers who have the most effective strategies, who are best at developing relationships, best at leadership, tend to end up with class. I'm not saying in all classes, but end up with the classes that kind of scrape off the cream, and so their skills are not being utilized. How do we change that? Because that's, any teacher that's been in a job for 10 years says those set of classes, it's my turn now. And I'm not saying all teachers say that, but it's just kind of how we think. How do we disrupt that so that we're really putting our best teachers in front of the students that are most struggling?
Mr. Davis, you're describing a national problem in education where you're most veteran and you're most experienced, and the teachers who do get to go to the conferences annually, they're the ones who also work with what the assessment scores and assessment tests would say are most academically gifted as well, right? What I have found is that if you implement this process and you allow teacher teams to come together to apply data literacy to refine their planning, eventually the teacher who, if you're sitting with a team of 4 teachers or 3 teachers, and you're continuously looking at the data of your students, eventually the teacher who may have the most skill will say, I'll take those kids. I've seen it actually happen before, but you have to create an environment where teachers are able to have that conversation on their own. And because it can't come from the top. It's gotta manifest itself from from the teaching staff itself. And so that's why we have 6 days of planning that started on Monday. That's why we felt it was really important as an administrative team. I felt it was important personally, and that's why I'm glad you approved the calendar for this year. 3 of the 6 days are teacher days. I had a team of during our PACE Institute on Monday, a group of teachers at Cedar Shoals pulled me to the side. They said, "So we have 3 days to ourselves?" And the response was yes, because I have confidence that once teachers have enough time to collaborate and look at the data of their kids, that type of conversation will emerge on its own. It doesn't work when when a building principal comes in and says, "I know you're the advanced placement teacher. I know you're the one that works with the high gifted students, but I want you to work with these struggling students instead." I've never seen that work well. I think it's got to come from teachers, and if we give them the space to look at their data and collaborate together, it typically will emerge.
I'm just wondering if there's something that we as a district can put in place to recognize those teachers who have stepped outside the box and are taking, because some of it is what, as you say, it's within the teaching profession, where people see themselves kind of working up, and we tend to minimize those who are working with those general 9th grade classes, for instance, when they could be teaching.
I think you've started the process as well, Mr. Davis. I think it's not only this, but I also believe that it's about you, the board, setting the tone, saying that equity is important to us. It's important to the organization. And equity means making sure that every child gets what he or she needs, and that it's about the outcomes and experiences for those students. I think when a school district sets a culture and a tone, that starts to impact people as well.
I think what you said earlier, Dr. Beams, you're right on target there. You have to get certain teachers out of that comfort zone. And you mentioned the word networking. And networking is in terms of having teachers to talk to other teachers. Because if you don't do that, it's not going to work. I used to say that, well, there are some teachers that said, "How many years you been teaching?" 25. Well, no, you've been teaching more, because the same thing you taught the first year, you still teaching it. But if you can get that to work, you will have a better school. There's no doubt about it. Like you said, it can't come from the top person down, the principal, et cetera. But the principal is going to keep an eye on that and get teachers networking together.
So this is all strategic. And so the calendar that was approved this year had in mind, the vision was you have to create teacher networks. I had a chance to walk through some of the buildings today. Teachers are talking to one another. You don't have to create administrative, this is the time where you must collaborate. I mean, that's when someone dictates that that's what you're supposed to do, it's not going to happen. But it was naturally happening in buildings today. I saw it with my own eyes, that if you give professionals the space to do what they need to do, they will rise to the challenge. And I firmly believe it. And so we've constructed our calendar that way to support this teacher learning subsystem.
So I can say I did get to go to both days of the kickoffs, and it was an amazing experience. And I did get a chance to talk to several people just in walking and riding up and down the escalators. And the feeling was very strong. It was very upbeat. People were engaged. They seemed interested in the conversation. And I want to see that carry over into the rest of the year. It was really, really dynamic speakers for sure. That was eye-opening. And even the delicate subjects were handled and seemed to be received well. And so I'm really excited about that and to see where that's going to lead us as well. A lot of fun. Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, please.
You mentioned walking through the schools, and then I heard that you were in some buildings too. And what is your how often do you try and get in the buildings? How many were you walking all of the schools, or what is your was it strategic that you're walking through the schools? I'm just genuinely curious. Are you in all of them? Some of them? How did you pick? What schools?
How did I pick the schools today?
And was it just today, or was it another day? I don't know. I mean, just like, are you trying to hit the schools before, I don't know.
I'm gonna try to hit as many schools as possible.
Yeah.
Between tomorrow and Monday, and then obviously all next week I'll be at. Eventually this week I'll hit all of our schools. It's important for me to be there and for me to be able to say hello to people and to connect. I really enjoyed. I'll bring it back to the Pace Institute where we had it at the Classic Center. It was fantastic, and that I had an opportunity to just connect with staff members that I haven't had a chance to connect with before. And people were able to come up and say, I've seen you before, but I haven't had a chance to talk. Can I talk to you for 3 minutes? I can't count the number of times I had that conversation with people just being able to connect. I think there was a power and a culture that was cultivated by having Pace Institute, and that there was just connections made. And the other powerful thing was there were teachers from all over the county who were coming together to learn together. And when you learn together, that again creates that. So it was, I'm constantly engaging and talking. Last year was a tough year in that it was, you're kind of thrown into a new system. And when you realize that the system needs work, and that you have to start doing this work, it takes time, but we constructed it. I didn't think we could finish it all in a year, but we did. And that was due to a lot of hard work from a lot of people. But now we're in a position where everyone, including our principals, feel at ease and they understand where we're going. I've talked about our Pace Institute and how great it was. We had an equally strong leadership retreat earlier this month where our principals, assistant principals, and we invited all of our instructional coaches to be there as well, just to talk about the vision in this work and what's the role of the principal, assistant principal, and instructional coach in supporting this work. Because in essence, we've turned it over. The work is now in the hands of staff members, and the way that they make the work happen. Now we want them to call us to say we need help, but now it's theirs. And school growth plans are due September 14th, and so it'll be interesting to see how the school growth plans come along. Those are 2-year plans, because I have found that it's unreasonable to tell a school on an annual basis, here's your goal. But it's a 2-year plan, and we'll see how it goes and move along. I think we want to be, as a district office team, we want to be truly supportive. And so going back to your original question, it's about getting out there, asking people what do they need as we have this new curriculum. It's about listening to people now. I mean, the system's in place. Now it's about asking people, so what do you need to make this work happen? Because the research shows that if you do this work, you see improvement. You see improvement if you do this work.
Dr. Means, you also mentioned the 3 planning days. That's extremely important, because you implement a new strategy, a new plan, and then you don't give teachers time to communicate and network with that. Having been a building principals, I heard teachers write all the time during the planning days. They send in meetings, listening to me, listening to the other principal, etc. So that's important.
Well, you'll also notice in the strategic plan under strategic priority 5, we identify the actual percentage of days. If you go into strategic plan number 5 of how many days are going to be committed to district PL, school, building level PL, and then teacher collaboration time. I've never seen a school district actually identify, we're going to make sure you get a certain percentage of teacher collaboration time every year in a calendar.
Just if I can follow up on my original thing, in the 7.5, almost 8 years I've been on the board, the one consistent thing that I've heard time and time again is about the superintendent of the buildings and how just supported they feel, as long as it's not an entourage. But I mean, just hey, how are things going? And over again, not in the last year or anything, but just in the reflection of the 7.5 years, it's been hasn't even been here a year, or haven't, you know, and those kinds of comments, and so I like hearing that you're walking the buildings, and the more you can do that, I think, in a, you know, casual way, in a supportive way.
Right,
it
right.
Really, it shows our principals, the district is linked back to the building, because that link often feels.
Karen, then I'll leave.
Do you envision a PACE academy for the local school governance teams to get them on board?
We have a number of different trainings that Claire Suggs is planning for our local school governance teams throughout the year. And we have a plan in place to support the local school governance teams in their work around the 5 areas of personnel, budget, and supporting the budget, school operations. I think the other category is school monitoring and monitoring the school growth plan, and then finally looking at and giving us input on curricular changes as they come. We've constructed a calendar and a series of professional learning opportunities for local school governance teams in that space, and Claire is going to be rolling that out soon.
It seems like to have a presentation like this, to know where the district itself is going and how they can plug in and monitor what their work is wrapped around the work of the district.
So part of the vision, Carol, that's a really good question. Part of the vision that Claire and I have been working on is to ensure that this message isn't coming from the top down. That if I need to be in the room or others need to be in the room, we can. I've been providing these same slides to building principals. And we believe that it's important for building principals to understand this strong enough where they can provide this to their local school governance team and say, this is where we are going. See, typically what happens is when the superintendent or someone from the district office has to come in and say, this is where we're going, it still becomes a us, them. When the principal and the co-chair can say, we've downloaded this, we understand what this is, and then we can share it with our full local school governance team, that creates it doesn't become an us and them, it becomes a we. And so that's part of our strategy as well, of making it more of a we, of this is where we're all going versus this is where the district wants us to go. Because it was really powerful at our leadership retreat a few weeks ago in early July. The principals, assistant principals, and instructional coaches said, no, we are all aligned and we're excited about this work. And I had a lot of principals pull me to the side and say, typically this was about, it was a you sit and get, and this is where the district is telling us to go. Where it was more, let's build this together. And we have an amazing team of principals, assistant principals, and instructional coaches. We have good people, and they're excited to do this work. So that's, to answer your question, Carol, yes, this is all part of our vision of making sure that this cascades to every school through their local school governance.
And can you tell me how you envision also the accomplishment of our young people, our students, without waiting on a milestones test? Is there going to be a regular, because I don't think one test should be a surprise. I think we need to see that advancement.
So the work you did this spring, the work we brought before you eliminates that. Again, it brings it back to, let me show you earlier. So here, the vision all along was we needed to build our instructional materials and assessments. We didn't have strong enough assessments, and therefore we were only relying on milestones. Now we know that we have the NWA map as an assessment tool that we can use 3 times a year. We also have assessments of unit work. And so end of unit assessments have been created for our end of course classes at the middle school and high school level. We started the process of building those for our non-EOC courses during PACE Institute on Monday and Tuesday. We're starting to develop more assessments, not for assessment's sake, but to measure where students are to tell us where we need to adjust assessment and adjust instruction. And so to your point, Carol, what I know we're gonna find, and that's another reason why the school growth plans are due September 14th, Schools are waiting to see where their kids land on the NWA MAP scores. In the past, we used to do school growth plans based on Georgia milestone data and where we were going to hit on milestone data. Now, principals are saying, no, we need to wait. And can you give us more time to develop these school growth plans? Because we will base this on our MAP scores, which we know we're going to provide 3 times a year. And that we know we can use this cycle of adjusting our instruction to make sure that students are growing. Again, it seems small, but those little moves, they change an entire culture and an entire school system. And I guess the last thing I want to share is when you use assessments to refine instructional practices versus making it high stakes, like the Georgia milestones, you create a culture where it's okay to fail and to grow from it. What we tried to say is that you've heard the terminology of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Well, with a growth mindset, you have to create a culture where it's okay to fail. And what we told our principals, we've been telling our teachers, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. We don't want you to be perfect. When in life have we been perfect and you've learned from it? You typically learn from what? Your failures. And so we want to create a culture where it's okay to fail, but we're going to get A by continuing to look at data. You can only do that, Carol, if you have assessments that you're using more than once. And so we are rejecting the stance of using the milestones as school growth plan goals. We believe that using our end of unit assessments and using our MAP scores, that's the way to go. And so you'll see with those school growth plans, a lot of it will go away from the milestones, and it's going to be more focused on MAP scores and end of unit scores.
I look forward to that.
I guess, I think I've changed my question now, based on what you just said. So at the end of the day, when we are evaluated by the state and the officer, whatever his title is he going to be looking at milestones, or are you going to explain if we're not in that? And how does that work? Because at the end of the day, we're still required by state to have good testing.
It's a great question. Statistically, we know that when you have rigorous standards-based assessments that are created at the unit level, and when you are setting the bar high with NWA MAP scores, the kids naturally grow. And so when they are asked to then perform on a summative assessment like the milestones, they do better on those assessments when they've had practice throughout the year. When you don't have practice throughout the year with standards-based assessments, with end of units assessments that's tied back to the standards, or with the NWA MAP, you don't do as well. And so by creating a multi-tiered, multi-assessment tool, we believe kids will eventually do better on the milestones because they've had more practice. And ultimately, our instructors have adjusted their instruction to meet the needs of those students as they continue to grow throughout the year. See, when you don't know where you are and where the kids are, then you can't adjust your instruction. So then it's about teaching what you're supposed to teach from a content standpoint versus evaluating what you have done to impact learning. Those are they're nuanced changes in culture, but they're significant. They're huge changes in how we look at education. They're huge. And so making that shift, we're confident that eventually if we stay true to this process, we will see a better performance on milestones. It's interesting because we've had conversations as a board and it's been mentioned we used to do really well. The CRTC, this district used to do very well on that assessment. Well, this model is similar to what you had in place when the district was doing very well in the CRTC. When you had multi-assessments that were tied back to standards-based curriculum, when you were I wouldn't say constantly, but you were routinely assessing students. If you're routinely assessing students and making sure that they're moving along the way, eventually, whenever you take that state assessment, you're going to do better. This is part of the model that was in place when Clarke County was performing well.
And I guess that was, where I was coming from. Even when Sarah mentioned about visiting, the schools, very early on in past administration, that's all I heard. This man's at the school all the time, and some kind of way we got away from it. And I think when you do have a good thing, it's not because we don't know, it's about how do we keep the momentum going? How do we keep doing better? So I know I won't be here to see that, but I think it's nothing new up under the sun, but it just needs to keep going. And that's all I'm saying too.
Well, you're making, so let's pull that out and tease that out just a bit, because I think it's really important. So it was one person. I received a lot of history last year. And when you talk to people, they would say there was one person in the curriculum and instruction office who was driving a lot of this work. It can't be one person. And so what we did last year and what we continue to do, and that's why it's important to have a subsystem of teacher learning and professional learning for everybody in the organization. It can't be one person. So we build team. We've been building team where it's not about one person, but it's not about us, or it's not about the district telling us to do certain things. But I think that was part of the feel in the past. This is more about we are doing this. And I think that spirit, that culture, that foundation that we've built will continue to grow. And that's why it's important for us to have things like PACE Institute, where we are investing in teachers. See, teachers don't typically, organizations don't invest in teachers and say, hey, we want you to go to a high level professional learning opportunity. We want you to be exposed to high level learning. That typically doesn't happen in our profession. And we've created, I'm really proud of the fact that with our principals, we've created a vision where that's happening now.
Fantastic. And I can listen to this and we could talk about this for everybody. I really
Circle down.
appreciate that. Yeah. Great.
Dr. Means, what I'm hearing, I mean, there's a lot of ownership that's being placed on the school level, which I really see, and see the value of that. Is there talk within the school, in particular schools or whatever? I mean, there are, having gone to these national conferences and hearing different school systems make presentations, when they've improved academic achievement. A lot of times, and I don't want to say these are easy fixes, but there are kind of dramatic things that the community kind of says, whoa, things like, extended day, extended year, theme schools, zoning issues.
Yep.
Because everything, because there's a lot of work that's been done, but and there's really encouragement about a new mindset. But are there, and I don't want to introduce these as quick fixes, but are we heading in a direction where we're going to be thinking kind of outside the box in some of these areas?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because when I'm in the community, when I've talked to some of you individually, that's been the question of, so what are we going to do? What's happening? What's coming down the pike? The research is pretty simple. This is the work. Here's what the research says. This is really hard to implement. It's really, to Ovita's question, and it's hard to sustain. It's hard to sustain. And so typically you have one person or two people who are constantly saying, so this is the work you have to do. And so then it becomes an issue of, it's a mandate. And when it becomes a mandate, then it doesn't feel right. And so it's really important to create and construct these systems in a way where it's not about being a mandate, but it's ultimately, and I think I hope you're kind of piecing everything that I've talked to you about over the last year together now. I hope you are. Because when you have, where is it? Sorry. So we had a moral imperative. We have a moral imperative with our work and our data. So we know what the moral imperative is. And the good thing is that moral imperative, sometimes people will push back and say, that's not really that important. The good thing about Clarke County is everyone knows we have to do better. We have to do a better job, not for just one group of kids, but for all of our kids. All of our kids. And so knowing that we have a moral imperative, people have embraced a mindset of transforming, which then leads us back to this model that was framed on this foundation of this being the system. So to answer your question, Greg, yes, I think in school districts like ours, everyone assumes that there's this magical silver bullet. The research will tell you there is no silver bullet. It does not exist. It's a matter of putting pieces together that are really hard to put together and to train and to provide professional development where people are learning. I can't credit our principals and our assistant principals and our instructional coaches enough. They went through a lot of professional learning last year. So it wasn't about the vision that I had to say, okay, we're going to implement these things. What I felt we needed to do is to learn together as a team. And as we started to learn together as a team, people started to not only see it for themselves, they took it and people have ran with it. People have taken this work and they're running with it. We're now in a mode of not having to teach people what this is. We're now in a mode of supporting. So no, I don't think there is any, extended learning day or magnet schools. Those are quick fixes. What we know about really good work in terms of turning school districts around is you have to commit and sustain this type of work. And you have to have, and that's why I'm really happy to be here. You have to have a team of people at the district level that is instructionally minded. And so all of our folks are instructionally minded. So Lynn Duke, when she's hiring people, she's taking that from, is this the right person to do this work? John Gilbreth, when he's building buildings, is thinking, so we were walking through Oglethorpe today. Oglethorpe has the professional learning room of all professional learning rooms. It's an amazing room. Part of that vision was he understands teacher collaboration is important. And so, no, Greg, I think in urban, everyone wants a silver bullet. This is really about supporting teacher learning, supporting leadership learning, and growing together, building a team, and doing what our keynote speaker said is really hard work, but it can be accomplished. I'll close on this. Christine Mraz said that she works in a tough school system. She works in New York City schools. And she said, my kids, they have to rush home, not because they have to go home, they have to get in line so they can get a bed and a shelter. And she said, even those kids can learn. And they have learned in her classroom. And so, yes, every kid can grow, but you have to have a mentality, you have to have a system that we now have in place.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Mills. Looking forward to this school year. Lots of exciting times.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Means, for bringing the paper calendar back.
No, you should thank Mary Wickwire.
Well, whoever.
Mary Wickwire deserves all the credit.
Received so many negative comments about that. But anyway, thanks, okay?
I think I'll go back through my emails and find those people that asked about this and let them know what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
But
I didn't know that you gained that type of
It'll be
attention.
given out in schools tomorrow at the open houses.
Oh, great,
Yeah.
great.
Can I just ask a couple more questions of the superintendent?
Around this topic, because we
No, just in general. Is there a tentative date for the opening of Oglethorpe? I mean, official ribbon cutting type opening?
Yes,
that's gonna come up on
August
the
19th.
slide.
What? August 19th, Sunday, August 19th. I don't know the time.
I can probably.
From Mary. Someone will tell us in a second. Thank you. If I may pivot just before you ask your next question, we may come up with in the SPLOSH report, but I'll dive in and talk about it now. Oglethorpe will be ready. It'll be close, There's still some things that may not be accomplished on the punch list for day one, but it will be ready to greet children on August 7th. We are still working through our challenges with PHL and COIL. I'll be able to give you a better update on Sunday. But we're gonna keep pushing and working hard. That's where we stand with those 3 schools.
2 to 4.
2 to 4 on August
August
19th.
19th.
And I'm putting it on the board event calendar right now.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
And have conversations started about meeting with the Career Academy Board.
Yes, so part of our September work session will be having that team here. We've committed to having 2 meetings with their Career Academy Board. One will be in September and another will be later in the school year.
And a third one, I had on my calendar, Trigger Educational Analytical Processes from 9 to 3 in a couple of weeks. Is that?
That shouldn't be on your calendar,
It is on our calendar.
but that's something for our administrator team,
I think it just got clipped wrong.
I
It's on our
apologize.
calendar. That's it.
You,
I was wondering what that was.
you do have the Brad Draper interview.
Yes. Yeah, the 15th and the 16th.
Are there any other events that are coming up that we should go ahead and put on the calendar?
So you can put 'em
May I ask if you are not, your iPads are not syncing with your board events calendar, if you could please let me know, because we knew a couple of you were having trouble.
I'm good.
Okay,
Thanks to
I am
I
too.
only-
David.
I only have just the regular meetings and stuff on mine. If there's something else, I'll
I'm,
get together with you. after
Okay.
this and we can talk about it.
All good? All right, let's move forward with the information items, Head Start, early Head Start policy, council monthly report. Very
I have 2 pieces of information that a board member requested. I'll send the other pieces of information in email, but I thought it was interesting. This is interesting data for all. There was a question about the number of returning early learning teachers. Certified pre-kindergarten teachers, 19 of our 38 are returning from the prior year. Of our pre-kindergarten special ed teachers, 6 of our 9.5 are returning. Of our classified Head Start teachers, 4 of 6 are returning. And of our early Head Start teachers, 14 of our 6. And I'll put all of this in an email to you as well. 14 out of 16 are returning. So the next question was, how many of our early learning teachers have transferred? We've talked about the fact that our early learning and pre-kindergarten teachers are not compensated at the same level, and that we believe that this may even be a legislative issue for our school district to advocate around. 9 of our pre-kindergarten teachers transferred to another position in the district. 1 of our kindergarten special ed teachers transferred, 1 of our Head Start teachers transferred, and 1 of our early Head Start teachers transferred. 10 resigned from the district. And the reasons are, there are multiple reasons. Some people moved out of the area. Some are pursuing additional education to be in a better position professionally. And some transferred to other school districts and moved into upper grade levels. And then here's the burning pain question. So how many kids do we have enrolled? So thank you for asking the burning pain question. We have 830 students enrolled in pre-kindergarten, 830. According to our fearless leader, Karen, that is our capacity. So we're at capacity in terms of pre-kindergarten. We currently have 136 kids on a wait list. We have 136 kids on a wait list still, understanding that we are at capacity now.
Oh, that's a high percentage.
How does that stand last year? I mean, just how-
It's about the same number.
Have we improved our capacity last year to this year?
No, it's the same. It's the same. And so I've met with Karen and Executive Director Nolan, Dr. Nolan, who's our executive director of elementary ed. And this goes back to my previous conversation, and Karen and Dr. Nolan have worked well. We want to be more deliberate about that connection between the Office of Early Learning and elementary education in terms of the curriculum articulation and everything else. But we've estimated that we could use up to 10 more classrooms. I mean, obviously, if we have 136 kids on a wait list, that's critical. I think it's mission critical. You've heard me talk about early learning before. So that's the answer to some of your numeric questions. I'll send the others later.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
It's all that.
Absolutely. I'll take care.
And we did I sent a follow-up email, and those questions I've already gotten answers to, so Karen, thank you for that. But we do as a board, Mr. Payne is still on, I guess we call it medical leave. And so we don't have representation at the early Head Start meetings. And I guess it would be great if we could have an alternate or somebody to volunteer to sit in. There are some major changes coming up in that program, and I think we would want to be on the front end of understanding how that's going to affect us.
When do they meet? When y'all meet?
We typically meet on the third Tuesday between 11 and 1. We have several community. We typically have a board representative as well as parents that run that board. It essentially functions like an LSGT.
Okay, so it's the third. Did you
Third
send that?
I absolutely can share that schedule with Ms. D, and she
Okay.
can share it with the board, and whoever
Thank
is
you.
available and willing, we would.
Thanks, Karen.
Absolutely include you.
Yeah, I think if it's, just to say, if it's on our calendar, even if we need to know when we're required to be there and when it would be nice to be there. But if all that stuff is on our calendar, then it doesn't slip away from us. So if we have the time, we say, by God,
But that's like one board member signs up for that.
Right.
but I mean, I'm sure if they were 2 board members, she wouldn't object.
Well, it's
Well,
not at all.
It's an open meeting, anyone
It
can
is
do
an
that.
open meeting. Anyone is always welcome.
So it would be good to be on the calendar if anybody could go
Right.
by here just so.
So you like all
She'll get you the
Okay.
dates and we can put it on there.
that would be great. But I think it would also be good if you're going to go to let somebody know that you're going. So
We don't inadvertently end up with board quorum.
We would hate 5 or more of you to say,
yeah,
this is the day that you're going.
yeah, because this one you get lunch still.
Yes, ma'am.
So we want to make sure.
Well,
that
I
we're
plan on
prepared.
being there, so.
Thank you.
So you want to be the alternate? Or
Sure.
you just plan to be there?
Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. Awesome. That makes me feel better. I read some things in there that really made me stop and think, oh. Okay. Are we done with Head Start Early? Head Start. Any questions about the report? Everybody good? Moving down to the SPOS report.
Madam Chair, I think the important point that I would share with you is that received year to date, our average has been a little over $2 million. And if you remember, we always have the goal of hitting $1.8 million, excuse me, with monthly receipts. And so we've done well throughout the year. There was a little bit of a dip throughout some of the non-fall football months, but overall the average over the last 11 months has been a little over $2 million. Again, I would just share with you that I never thought that there would be so much rain in Georgia in the summer months. And if you remember when Mr. Gilbert presented to you, the one challenge we were hoping wouldn't happen to us this summer would be rain. Well, there's been a lot of rain. I told the school nutrition staff when I greeted them this morning, I thought I was moving to Georgia, not Seattle. But it's been a challenge for us. And again, we're really pleased with Oglethorpe. We hope all of you can be there on the 19th. We've talked about COIL and BHL, and hats off to excuse me, hats off to the team at Hillsman. They've made a very good transition to what is a very small space for middle school students. There has been some conversation. I think Principal Tolbert made the right decision in that the hallways are not as wide as a typical middle school. And so she's asked that the kids kind of downgrade to more of a smaller backpack, more of the nylon pull string backpack versus the real backpacks. And she met with her PTO leaders today. They walked the hallways and said, "Oh yes, we definitely are supportive of this policy change while we're in the old Gaines building." But they're all unpacked, I should say, and ready to educate children on the 7th as well. Yes.
Yeah, last year there was just a lot of question about traffic flows, walking, students walking, all that kind of thing. I haven't seen any changes at all in terms of I know there were talks about maybe a stoplight or just.
There will be extra police presence at Old Gaines, also at Oglethorpe as well. I mean, there's actually, we've contracted and been in contact with ACCPD. There will be extra staff at both of those sites. Mr. Gilbreth and his team, along with the administration at Hillsman, they've walked the entire grounds at Old Gaines, because there's some back passageways where the kids in the area can go through certain gates, and so they've tried to tighten up some of that those issues with the school grounds, and so there will be more presence on the 7th, and at least for the first week at that school and also at Oglethorpe in terms of traffic flow.
Can you refresh my memory? Is Hillsman a 1 year or?
It's 18 months.
That's what I thought.
And that's what we're projecting.
I've heard a lot of just, now I have a middle schooler, so I'm in the middle school world now, or about to be, thank you.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of just no lockers, where's everybody gonna put their stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, truly, I think that is a very difficult thing to negotiate and navigate. I assume there's a plan and people are figuring it out. And I heard one plan, it didn't sound awesome, but I don't know what a better.
I think we're still trying to work it through, but it's a temporary. We're finding that this is not an ideal temporary placement for middle schoolers.
Yeah.
It's just not. And so we're hoping that we can trim down the 18 months, but that's what's on the books. Yeah, that's what we're anticipating.
Not this weather.
Right.
And I may have missed it, but what are the challenges at BHL and Coyle? What is the?
I would, well, as far as the construction goes, I would equate Oglethorpe, if you're building a brand new house and you're moving in and you got some punch list items with the contractor. BHL and Coyle, I would equate to a home renovation when you're living there while the contractor's renovating.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just an update, we got our TCO at Coyle, and we got the TCO at Oglethorpe. We have to do a re-inspection tomorrow at BHL. So we expect to get the TCO to be able to occupy the building from the fire marshal tomorrow. So tomorrow we should be good at all 3 sites. Challenges is just, it's aesthetically not going to be as pleasing as when you walk in Oglethorpe. When you go into BH and Coyle, we still got to finish some items in the front entrance. The front desks are being delivered tomorrow, so we'll be installing those over the weekend. So we still have, some finishing details and touches to do. The landscaping is, it's rained for however many months, so we got some challenges there. We've got some temporary.
And hailed.
Yeah, we've got, silt fences up to try to corral everybody so we're not walking through mud and messing up our new finishes. So it's, again, we bit off a big chunk, but there was only, the summer is when you can renovate the admin, kitchen, cafeteria, things like that. And we, did everything we could, so.
Well, I haven't driven by Coyle or BHL. Oglethorpe looks beautiful, but I think my heart will rest easier once that landscaping is in and the rain stops, because it's a lot of mud.
Yeah.
Ditto, I drive by there every week at least, maybe twice a week, and it is magnificent. It's really,
It's gorgeous.
it's like rising. Good. Any other concerns there? All right, we're down to the draft board items, action items, the minutes of the previous meeting. Any corrections or concerns about the minutes?
I just want to say that last board meeting minutes were very helpful. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, it was very detailed. So
Welcome to slide. Madam Chair, if I can just, and this is now having been here a year, I would just, the minutes of May and June, just remind me that I will be asking the board if we can at least meet, and I've talked to at least some of you who have been on the board for a while, if we can at least meet once to engage and take care of personnel issues in the month of July. It will be helpful to us organizationally in the future. And frankly, there's a level of, I don't like not being with the group for as long as we've been separated. So it's good to have you all here. But we'll be collectively making that request of the board that we at least connect once. If we can just have a quorum get together, there's a lot of movement. Dr. Knotts and Mr. Worthy were part of the finance committee meeting earlier today. That was just more of a conversation. And it wasn't an official meeting. We talked about the fact that with a booming and strong economy, what we're finding in the human resources world is teachers are more free agents and they move more. And there's a lot more movement that we're seeing. And it's happening, it's just happening more. We also know that from a financial standpoint, we have to become more competitive with our area school districts who are offering incentives like signing bonuses. And so a part of our plan is to use our midterm adjustment that we'll get from the state, will allow Ms. Duke and her team to go to job fairs starting in January, February, armed with signing bonuses. We're finding that we're behind in that we're not in the same space of asking for candidates to fill vacancies at the same time as other districts, and those districts are giving incentives. And so that's just, I just wanted to bring that full circle, Ms. Davis, that we'll be making that request.
We've done that before, Dr. Means.
Okay.
Okay, so we've looked at the minutes of the previous meetings, the regular meetings. What about the financial reports? Any questions about the financial reports? All right, coming out of policy council, no concerns. What about policies, regulations, exhibits to be posted? I think we have our largest group now coming down, right?
Those have been posted.
Yeah.
These are moving
down. So
towards
we have anything?
adoption.
We don't have anything because we haven't had a meeting.
Right.
So yay, we can pass on that. And we are down to agenda item number 4, policies to be adopted and rescinded. I'm going to turn that over to our policy committee chairperson, who's worked with us so diligently and patiently on the governance policies.
So Dawn and I met, and Dr. Means and Dawn and I kind of just prepared a little history on from the beginning to now as to where we got with our policies. Probably just as much for the public who, especially who made some comments and who are watching as, as for, obviously you as board members have been part of it, so but just kind of for the official minutes, I just prepared a little document. So if you'll take one and pass them around, and then we can put the extras out if people in the audience would like one. And if I can just, I don't particularly enjoy when people read to me, but if I can just maybe read the document and then just maybe frame our discussion and then go from here on discussing the policies. I said it might be helpful to recap our brief history. Maybe brief is the wrong word. As to the journey we have taken for the board governance policies, the Clarke County School District Board of Education has been working on its board governance policy since the spring of 2017. The work began after interim superintendent Dr. Jack Parrish was able to work with and observe the board during his brief tenure. Dr. Parrish recommended that the board attend to its board governance policies to 1, become a more efficient board through the deliberate description of effective board member behaviors, and 2, ensure greater clarity of roles and responsibilities of the board and superintendent prior to the arrival of the newly selected superintendent. The board secured the services of attorney Glenn Brock of Nelson Mullins Law Firm to facilitate board governance trainings and to conduct an analysis of the B policies. Mr. Brock made some recommendations for policy modifications, which have since been implemented. Upon his arrival, Dr. Means arranged governance training for the board. The training was rooted in learning more about the balanced governance model. Balanced governance is a school governance approach that supports and promotes balance by discouraging micromanaging on one end of the governance spectrum while also not falling in as a disengaged rubber stamping board on the other. In addition, the board learned that when board members and superintendents are more clear about who is responsible for what duties, it eliminates frustration and conflict. Dr. Alsbury, co-editor of the book Improving School Board Effectiveness, provided the training. The initial training took place in August 2017, and a follow-up session took place in December 2017. After the two trainings, totaling 12 hours, the board agreed to create policies aligned with the balanced governance model. Dr. Alsbury provided sample policies for the board to consider for adoption that were aligned to the balanced governance approach. In addition, Dr. Means was invited by the board to share examples of policies from his previous district that would align to the current governance structure to more of a balanced governance model. Policies currently under deliberation by the board are the result of the work started back in the spring of 2017. The board released the proposed policies for public comment, and we have received some comments and concerns. Some suggestions from the community can be easily instituted as they pertain to the use of specific words and or the removal of the trademark symbol associated with the balanced governance approach. While the changes above can be made, the spirit of the proposed policies are critical for effective governance in CCSD. Governance policies are enacted in school districts to establish roles and responsibilities and to provide structure for the organization. In particular, policy BH establishes board member behavior and is based on the model code of ethics, and it must be retained by charter systems. Georgia Code 20-2-2065 gives the state board power to make regulations that are applicable to charter systems, and State Board Regulation 160-4-9-06 says the model code must be part of the charter schools ethics code at a minimum. By considering these policies, the board is committing to its role as trustees, a role that we agreed to during our balanced governance training. Serving as trustees means that board members act rationally to serve a broad public interest. Further, a trustee is a member of a governance team. Board member governance rejects the notion that board members are delegates who protect personal interests in the interest of the factional special interest groups supporting them. In addition, it's worth noting that serving on a school board is different from serving as a commissioner or a state representative. While commissioners and board members are both elected, the roles are extremely different. Board of Education members are members of a team. Commissioners represent a specific constituency. Board of Education members, while elected to a specific district, represent the interest of each and every school, each and every child, regardless of the district. Research shows that boards who are committed to a governance model and subsequently act accordingly do have positive influences on school academic performance. It is solely in this spirit that these policies have been proposed. While it's possible that the policies could be crafted to reflect the selection of some better words to express the intent of the documents, the objective of bringing these policies forward remains to 1, assist the CCSD board in becoming a more efficient board through the deliberate description of effective board member behaviors, and 2, to ensure clarity of roles and responsibilities in the board and the superintendent. Just in response to some of the comments, I thought it might be helpful to provide some clarity about how we got here and then what, and some comments from the public are, this is just a minute.
Oh. Policy minutes?
No, for
On board.
This work session.
work
Oh.
session. I think that it's helpful to remember that we've discussed when we open things up for comment, which is exactly what we should do, and I'm proud to do it. It's hard because everybody hasn't sat in a single solitary meeting that led up to certain decisions, and so which I wouldn't expect anybody to want to sit in on every single policy committee meeting. But anyway, it just lends itself to having to go back and rehash things that were hashed out, multiple ways. So that's where we are with that. And as far as leading this discussion, I don't really know how to lead the discussion most effectively and with, bringing to the table everybody's ideas and be really effective and what's the word I'm looking for? Like efficient with it.
Let's try this then. How about, what is your recommendation in terms of the policies that we have posted and the comments that we've received?
Okay.
Give us a recommendation.
I'll throw a recommendation out there. Yeah. My recommendation would be that we move forward on the approval of the B policies as listed below, B and C policies as listed below, with some minor corrections based on public comment. One would be removing the trademark from the policies. Just there's no reason that it has to be in there. And I do believe that it can be somewhat confusing. Back in the beginning of this discussion, I believe Carol added that the property committee would review all of our facilities on an annual basis. And so that is not that would need to be voted to add that in, because we haven't officially made that happen yet. And then, my third recommendation would be, because there was some confusion on this one, specifically on BIFBG. Number 1, board member computer and internet use. The board will not use email communications via social media or other electronic communications as a substitute for deliberations or voting. My recommendation would be to strike for deliberations, because it was spoken, I think John brought it up, and maybe Greg too, that deliberations was just too broad and could be misconstrued, and so that would be my recommendation.
Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, but actually, in terms of what we're doing tonight, just looking at these, that you have a copy of all of the comments from the public. And next week at the regular board meeting, this is actually when we vote on it, and then of course, take a look at the comments from the public and see whether we're going to adjust some of these policies, vote for all of them, or whatever. So that's where we are tonight.
And given the opportunity of a work session to discuss these policies, I think that we should discuss. But I just didn't want to, I want to make sure that we discuss it in a way that we get to a place when we leave out of here that we can hopefully move forward next week.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm about to ask, please go ahead. I'm looking now for board members to weigh in on the plan. So Greg, go ahead.
Well, I haven't had a chance to read this.
Okay.
And so I just don't read that good on computer, and that's why I emailed Don to provide me a copy. So, I do think, I know we had 14 people who responded. Is that counting the ones that Carol added later? I mean,
Those are included. The ones that Carol forwarded in the email are included.
Okay, so they're included too. So I like I said, until I sit down and read this, I can't just say, well, let's just, pass it and see what happens next year. I mean, because I think there's enough people, because a lot of times when we ask for public comment, we don't get any. And so, and we kind of, I don't think we snicker about it, but it's kind of like, you put it out there and you want public comment, and the public is kind of yawns. So now we've got feedback, and so I feel like I've got to do my due diligence and actually read it.
Yeah, we're not voting tonight. I just wanted to try and get some discussion going.
But you're already kind of making a proposal based on us not reading this.
Oh, it's not asking you to vote. It's just
okay.
just like, that's where I am,
Okay.
just as a facilitator of the policy.
Okay.
I feel like we haven't done it in forever.
We
So
haven't.
my memory of this is not very good, but when you mentioned those items, I thought we talked about those before these went out for public comment. We didn't.
It was the night that we voted to put them out for public comment was, well, I don't know if it's officially added, to be quite honest, I didn't go back. I don't think we officially added it that night. I think it was a discussion of that would be something that would be great to add when we vote on the final version. But those went up that night. I'll have to look at it. I just have to look at it right now. But this is the packet that I had in my hand that night. And I made a note, I haven't printed another one. I didn't print it again, so I didn't see it when I looked.
And all of us have
That
the
one
same
line,
copy.
whether or not it's added, but
So all of us have that same copy.
yeah, we all had this that night at our table. I just saved it. But so I don't think that one line went back out for public comment.
So I guess I'm not understanding.
The one about the property committee, Carol, we were talking about, it was with regard to the West Broad discussion. And Carol said our property committee should be evaluating our properties annually. And as a board, we discussed that would be a great line to add into our policy.
So they moved the public comment as approved by the policy committee?
Correct.
So it's my understanding the time to make a revision would be by the board at any point before the final vote.
So I don't think that one line was added to be posted on when they were, but I'd have to look, and I can look, I just don't want to do it right this second. But I just I hand wrote in here, so that's why I remembered it, just because that was a change that I thought would be a great change and a great recommendation.
I think our public comment did reflect some lack of clarity or understanding on some of these, and that I just think policies ought to be written in a way that they're very clear and very understandable, and if someone is trying to make a decision based on those, that.
I totally agree with you. I think these are board policies too, though, not policies necessarily by how, like, a student or,
No,
a,
but
you know.
as board members and people trying to understand a board from time to time, we need to be able to understand that too, so. I'm like, Greg, I would like to have a once more glance before next week, just to.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, this is not an action meeting, so there's plenty of time for that. I just want, I mean, you have the week to review the policies against the comments and all of that, but I just wanted, I guess, just to kind of set the tone of like, let's figure out, I hope that we're all coming with the spirit, together with the spirit of cooperation and trying to, you know, wrap this up so that so the policy committee can do other work, because it's been backlogged.
I do need to make sure that what I look at, I'm spending my time looking at what is relevant, so what we got last time is still the same, there have been no changes, what you're.
Yeah, this is what,
This is it.
42 days ago or 45 days ago, this,
Absolutely, we haven't changed any of the policies.
Yeah.
They were approved by the policy committee and they went as approved up for public comment.
yeah.
So
What-
no changes. at
You
all.
just made a
I know,
comment
but I
that
just
night, and I
wanted to
just
make sure.
added it in so that when we vote on the final, that we can add it in on the final.
So I know that even before that night, we had talked about some things, and I'll just make sure. that they're in there.
In policy committee?
Yeah, we talked about some verbiage.
If
Yeah,
that, then that should be, if it was in
I know,
policy
that's what
committee,
I'm-
then it should be reflected in this.
Right,
And
I just
that
wanted to
would be
make
the
sure
same.
that was the final that's out there.
Yeah,
That's
and I'd be happy
the
to,
same.
if you don't have it from
No,
that
I haven't.
night, I can make a copy if anybody wants the same, it's the same one.
But it's the same one that went out with our package as well.
Correct. And
Okay,
then
so
the
we're
comments.
good.
The only change was the public comment period ended on the 27th, and so what was included in your big packet from B was sent to you before the 27th. So tonight, this is a complete list as of the close on the 27th of all the public comments.
And it was emailed last night as well. Same thing.
All right, we have, is it?
Are there any more questions or any specific policies that anybody wants to clarify or anything like that?
I think that the comment that we need time to look at this kind of preempts that conversation.
Sure.
So we can, unless somebody has something that you want to talk about?
I think that the two, you pointed this out in your message, the two that I'll be looking at most are BH and BIFBG.
Which really, I mean, and you know,
And I think you've addressed
I addressed
two
one,
things, a couple of
Okay.
things, one in each. that
What were they? I'm sorry, I don't have them in front of me.
so on, BH, which was the bulk of the comments.
Right.
Which a lot of the comments are tied back to, not all of
No,
them,
yeah.
but a lot of them are tied back to required language from the state that we cannot change. And then a couple of them are about including that trademark, so if we can pull that out, I think it would be clearer and just better for policy. And then, are you listening to hear me?
No, I'm sorry, my bad.
So in BH, several of the comments are things that we cannot change because BH has the state language for the code of ethics. But we also inserted additional language. And in that additional language, there are some comments as well for that. The one thing that was commented on a couple of times is the trademark thing from Tom Malsbury's. And so I think if we remove that TM, I think it would be better. And then the other one was in BIFBG, and I believe both John and Greg commented on removing
What
Was
you
it
refer to,
deliberations online, like via email.
But didn't it have a definition? That's why I don't have it in front of me, but didn't it define what deliberations were?
I don't believe so.
So, it didn't.
Just go back.
But again, that's
Those
still
are
gonna be
my-
policy DH and BIFBG.
Were the ones that we received the most comments on were BH and BIFBG.
That's correct.
So those.
Oh, yes, it does. Deliberations defined as a receipt or exchange of
Right.
information.
So if you just take the word out, I mean, you still got the definition.
Agreed, we have to.
look at it.
So let's say, yeah, I think we're in good shape.
If I can just ask a question as we go forward, since we've been in mired in the B policies for so long, Sarah, what's the backlog? I saw in your message.
Dawn, could you speak to that?
Yeah,
Because
what's
actually, Dawn just said there's lots of
Oh,
departments
there's
that are
just so many policies from every department. HR has revised every single one of their policies that are kind of in the queue, ready to go. There's some policies from Larry's shop that are ready to go. There's many policies about student enrollment, attendance, discipline that I have coming for you that are really relevant to what we're doing with our students. And then I really feel most importantly, if we're going to ever take full advantage of the flexibility in our charter system contract, we need to look at those flexibility waivers and then replace with our policy that says what we're gonna do instead. And it's a really simple way to say something that we really need to do to reap the benefit of the flexibility that we have from the state in our contract. But we need the bandwidth and policy to do that work.
Yeah.
Can I put two other things out there that really have not been talked about policy?
Sure.
One is, and it started with my church, the fellowship, adopting a school. There was discussion among the parishioners about, we want to make sure that we're not transgressing between church and state. And then with, and we're on pretty safe ground, I think, in terms of my particular denomination. But then there are a number of other churches that are also adopting schools. And so I don't think we have a policy in terms of kind of when you adopt a school as a religious institution, what are the kind of the do's and don'ts in terms of proselytizing in particular. So I just put that out there, and it came up, and what I said at the time was, that's not this particular congregation's job to do. That's the job of the school district to have the policy about what we can and cannot do. It's not up to a denomination to decide that. So that would be one. The other is that Dr. Means, when we passed the equity policy, I think Dr. Means brought up a good point about we passed we did not have any regulations attached to that in terms of how that is being implemented, if I understood you correctly. And so that's probably less of maybe an urgent issue, but it is something that I think that we need to put in the pipeline.
So, well, it's an example. We could examine many of our policies and weigh them against the bigger equity issue and policy, and ensure that all of our policies ensure equitable access and service delivery. And that's just really hard work that, is there, and I'm excited about it. But those are great conversations for policy committee.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. All good? All right, we're on that page now. So we are looking for on the consent agenda, we have 8 items.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So there's consent agenda items that administration is recommending from 5 through 13.
Right.
I can take any questions from the board regarding those. We have a total of 5 field trips. Of the 5 field trips, I believe 3 are with FFA. There's 1 field trip with our cross-country team going somewhere, and then there's a field trip with our Clarke Middle kids overnight. In terms of everything else, I think it's really self-explanatory. The most exciting, if I may, and Ms. Williams mentioned this earlier, with the growth of the Career Academy is substantial. And so the cosmetology lab is something that we're really excited about. We received 1 bid to build that lab. We anticipate that it may be done somewhere around early November. It really depends on when the cabinets will come in, and also the other equipment, the chairs and so forth. But some of the plumbing issues in terms of making sure that there's sinks and those types of things, we can start tackling right away if you place this on the consent agenda. We're really excited about the classroom projector purchase. I think Mr. Duke did a good job in laying out that work in that executive summary and where the dollars are coming from. That's a SPLOST 5 purchase, and I think that was clearly articulated in your packet. And then the largest expenditure, but it's something that we have to do just because of our bandwidth, is our contract for certain special education services for students with special needs through our RESA. Slightly over $1 million in terms of all of those different services. We've looked at in the past if we could bring those services in-house, and we just don't have the ability. RESA does a good job in serving our kids in those particular areas that were highlighted in the executive summary. And so, Madam Chair, I wanted to give a broad overview of those consent agenda items. Some of them are very pedestrian and very routine things like identifying the equal opportunity officer and the ADA 504 coordinator, the district hearing officer. Those are things that we do routinely in office.
So great. With that overview in mind, is there anything that anyone would like to remove from this agenda?
I mean, if I could ask just a couple of questions here, one question here, and in terms of the RESA contract, is that we've always contracted with them? Is that historically we've just always done that?
Yes, sir.
And in terms of how is the cost number figured? That seems like it would be very difficult because we're sharing staff with the entire RESA area. So
it's a price point that RESA sets
okay
for us, and they charge, and then it becomes a matter of how often are you accessing those services. And so we are the largest, one of the largest district, very close to being as we continue to grow, largest district in our RESA. So some of the services, just for the board's sake and the public's sake, that's included in this service contract would be working with PTs and OTs, working with teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing, paraprofessionals for students with hearing impairments, interpreters. These are very high level, very high skilled services that are provided to our students with special needs, and that's why we go to RESA. And again, just to kind of give you perspective, this is a national issue where every school district is relying on their cooperative service agency, their regional service agency to provide these types of services for their students with special needs. It's usual and customary.
And in terms of the cosmetology, I know there was a space issue. Talking to people on the academy board, is that, I mean, where we found the space to do that? It's not your office, is it?
No, sir. It's room 78. It was a very nice professional learning room for us last year. It's gone now. But it's if you approve to place this on your consent agenda, it was a nice sized room that we were able to leverage last year. The Career Academy is growing so much. The conference room that sometimes board members have met as you walk out and you turn to the left from this area has been, the Career Academy needs it for instruction now. They need it to teach classes. So what I think I shared with you a couple months ago of the Career Academy is continuing to grow. I think our vision, our alignment of making sure that we're picking strands and pathways that the children, there was that criteria that we created, if you remember. We created one that said we have to have a community partner in that same industry. And that community partner has to tell us, well, there is an employment need here. And then we have to have the ability to have kids sign up for it. That was part of the criteria. Well, we have community partners who want to work with our kids in the area of cosmetology, and there's a high interest. At last count, there were 49 kids who signed up for this program that they haven't seen. And I think it'll grow over time.
So are we saying that 5 through 12 would be consent?
13.
Right, 13 is the personnel. So what are we saying?
5 through 12 is consent. Do we have all questions answered or concerns? Okay, great. So back to 12, remain consent. What about number 13? What were you saying? Mr. Ward?
I said that's personnel.
We've received the personnel list, but
Oh, yeah, we did.
We wanted to give you, I think, one thing that we've talked about is I want to give you that list as soon as possible. So you have it. And I've shared with you, we will try not to send you addendums if we can avoid it. This is the time of year where we can't avoid it. And so we will ask for your grace, your understanding in that we are at the start of the school year and Ms. Duke and her team are hiring hourly. And so we may bring an addendum to you so you can act on it next week, Thursday.
so we should pull
We
that
just
off.
pulled that from consent and we'll be fine. It just becomes
Yes, so I will go 5 through 12 and
Right.
just know that the current personnel list that you have will grow and there will be an addendum.
Awesome.
My only question is, how many spots do you still have to fill at this point?
At last look this afternoon, it was around 19. It keeps changing every time I think I have one, it's gone, so it's good, it's going the right direction. but we still have-
Congratulations, that's down from 95. Okay. So, I believe we are at the end of
Well, I
our,
want to ask Dr. Means one question about, in terms of your report next Thursday. Are you gonna kind of duplicate what you did today, or are you gonna be making a report? Not
Well, I'll make a report. It will not be as
as detailed?
detailed as this one. I think that's the beauty of the work session.
Okay.
But I'll touch on some high level
I mean,
points.
I'm just looking at it in terms of the community comes out more to that meeting than this meeting, and so we're, so they.
I will address many of these
Yeah.
points, but it'll be more high level.
so let me ask also, you have something for us that's on the website relative to our kickoff, relative to the PACE Academy? Do we have a summary there? And several of the speakers offered to send their notes because there was a really good reading list.
Right.
So,
If I can address that,
please.
those PowerPoints that I do have will be posted on the website. I don't have all of the speakers' PowerPoints, so.
Okay. That would be great.
And we also need to, I know some people went through the training with the doc,
Board docs.
board doc.
Mhm.
Some of us.
We are working with board docs right now to reschedule another session for board members.
And when I went on there, it didn't seem to be a whole lot on there. Is that because I don't know what I'm doing?
Partially.
Okay.
We've populated the library to a great extent, but we have not started to build agendas or put executive summaries on there.
Okay, thank you.
We will posting agendas and all this material on board docs for the September board.
Okay.
But if you go on that site now, most of our policies are there now. Some of it's still in assembly, but our policies are there right now. Mine is obviously the ones in front of you.
But does it let you go to other school districts and?
You can do a meta search as well.
Good.
So if you want to go on board docs and search for other code of ethics policies, you can do a comparison.
Yeah, that was really good. I enjoyed that part of it.
I'm more, I'm much of a religious.
And you can do that as well.
Yeah.
I was
Really?
So, yeah.
You guys have been amazing. Thank you for hanging in here with us for another long day. And I heard some people say they've been at it since 6 o'clock this morning. So
Mr. Gilbert has, yeah.
I'd like to get you back to your families as soon as we can. With that, do we have a motion for adjournment?
Ms. Davis, if I may, I do have a document that I need board members to sign that needs to be submitted to the Department of Education.
Okay, great.
Okay.